Aman. We're about to start. Ơi mà không cho nó được. True. Yeah. Yeah. Can you tell the chief whip? No. Hey, this guy now. Hey, this guy of IT is busy. One, two. Huh? 1, 2. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, the president.
First speaker is going to be Honorable Mohai, the Chief Whip of the Council.
Thank you very much, Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, the Speaker of the National Assembly, His Excellency the President of the Republic of South Africa, President Cyril Ramaphosa, the Deputy President of South Africa, Honorable Paul Mashatile, honorable members. Indeed, all of you look in a jovial mood. I do not know because it's a Valentine's Day today. You look great. Today, Bafana returned to the country after winning the third place medals in the Africa Cup of Nations. They return holding South African flag high. We applaud the team for their excellent performance. We also recognize the Ubuntu Lifetime Achievement Award recipient, Honorable Mohamed Dango, who has served our nation as a diplomat par excellence. Chairperson, Day one of the State of the Nation Address debate has demonstrated what President highlighted in SONA, that, and I quote, "Just as we cannot deny the progress South Africans has made over the last 30 years of our democracy, nor should we diminish the severe challenges that we continue to face," close quote. To create a better life for all, the second phase of our democratic transition has a primary task of significantly accelerating the fundamental task of attaining economic transformation. As we proclaim in the Freedom Charter that the people shall share in the country's wealth, and as we maintain in the ANC 1969 strategy and tactics, that to leave the structure of apartheid economy intact is to feed into white supremacy. Transforming South Africa's economy is a process that requires the state to mobilize its capabilities and all social partners to make a collective contribution. 30 years into our democratic breakthrough, we continue to have high levels of inequality, which exacerbate poverty and unemployment. Building a capable and ethical developmental state is the SIG administration's first priority, as the state's capability to implement its policies directly affect the success and challenges of changing the lives of the people for the better and including them in the economy. The Commission on Allegation of State Capture highlighted some of the systemic weakening of key institutions, network industry, security institutions, the public service, and other sectors. The Commission also highlighted the impact of private sector corruption on the state's capability, as observed in Eskom, Transnet, and SARS. Enhancing the capability of institutions and addressing governance challenges has improved planning and enhanced policy implementation. The National Development Plan envisioned a capable state through professionalization of the state. The amendment of the Public Service Amendment Bill addresses the political and administrative interface to enable a capable and ethical developmental state through devolving administrative powers from the executive authority to heads of department. Over the past 5 years, South African Revenue Services is one of the improved institutions strengthened and supported through government support, effective leadership, and invigorated workforce. We welcome the decision of the Commissioner to stay on beyond his contract and create space for the effective succession. The Development Bank of South Africa continues to finance key infrastructure developments and operate efficiently. The opposition never talks about DBSA. Quite simply, it's doing so well. No praise for DBSA from the opposition either, because they are hell-bent on painting state institutions as inevitably inefficient and hopeless. But the facts speak for themselves. Your Excellency, scholars such as Professor Mariana have highlighted that continuous reliance on consultants infantilizes the state and its ability to develop the technical capabilities required to implement policy. The current model of outsourcing implementation has resulted in some of the current weaknesses related to infrastructure development and maintenance. We must ensure all local government municipalities have sufficient internal technical capacity to maintain roads, buildings, mechanical components, and other maintenance needs. Infrastructure departments should also have sufficient maintenance capacity, and outsourcing should be more on built environment development. This will ensure that we employ more young people and graduates from our many TVET colleges as students who has to serve to feed the industry. In our quest to transform the economy, we should also recognize the impact of the changing world of artificial intelligence and the effects of climate change. We should realize that digitization and technological innovation will impact economic sectors that are more labor-intensive. This requires our vision of economic transformation to leave no one behind as the form of production evolves. Just transition should focus not only on energy sector, but also on other sectors impacted by technological innovation, and the green transition. The reskilling of our labor force is critical to transition workers to emerging labor markets demand. Chairperson, developing a green industrialization value chains is important for the future competitiveness of our industries. Leveraging the African continental free trade area requires us to develop green solutions for our domestic and continental markets in energy, automotive sector, and other technologies. Despite having progressive legislation on competition and industrial policy that promotes involvement of previously marginalized, barriers to entry for many SMEs and Black people and women persist. The Black Industrialist Program is a commendable intervention of the democratic government to develop Black producers, and we must massify this intervention. Over the 30 years of democracy, we have successfully used public procurement to empower businesses and local producers. One of the major achievements of the 6th Parliament will be processing the Public Procurement Bill, which enables public institutions to determine set-asides for women, youth, and persons with disability, and support small businesses and cooperatives. Chairperson, localization remains a key local economic development anchor, and through public expenditure, we must strengthen our local supply value chain with local producers and businesses. For example, we must ensure that our Department of Agriculture works closely with Department of Education, Health, Correctional Services, Trade and Industry to develop an ecosystem wherein the youth, women and cooperatives produce food supply to a captive market set aside for local producers. The food supply to our schools, clinics, hospitals, and prisons should be produced primarily by locals. This approach will encourage many South Africans to increase productivity and transcend subsistence farming, particularly in rural areas. The Census 2022 outcomes reflect low land use for agricultural purposes in most provinces. Local agro-processing enterprises should also have a captive market that is set aside for their produce as we conceptualize in the agri-parks model. This model needs to ensure that anchors in communities and towns working in an integrated manner that opens local markets and changes the quality of life directly. Major retailers and producers should close the demand-supply gap. Such an ecosystem will enhance the impact of our agrarian reform program. The state has to facilitate this. We, as Parliament, need to monitor it. Critical for industrialization is ensuring the financial sector allocates sufficient capital to develop local industries to increase our manufacturing base. Key interventions are required to increase domestic investment, including the President's Investment Drive initiative, lowering transport costs and ensuring the efficiency of our network industry will enhance competitiveness of our economy and lower the cost of transport for citizens. We welcome the increase in commuter rail and support for Transnet turnaround strategy for bringing logistical transport back to rail. We are aware of the false narrative by those who have benefited from the apartheid economy, who claim that affirmative action, triple BEE, and progressive public procurement policies constitute discrimination as they exclude whites. Triple BEE is in all our interests, both black and white. As if we do not reduce the racial inequalities in the economy, all of us will bear the consequences. Chairperson, the ANC-led government, we have agreed that we have to focus on lowering the cost of living, and various intervention measures are under consideration. We need to target commuter transport and basic foods for caution the poor and enable real value of working person salary to produce for their families, that subsidizing transport costs, similarly ongoing work as basic income grant must continue. As Parliament, we are processing the Pension Fund Amendment Bill, which will enable workers to access a portion of their pension funds. This will impact the cost of living for millions of workers. The two-pot system is one of the transformative measures to improve the well-being of workers. At the same time, we have adjusted the percentage increase on the minimum wage well above inflation over 6 million of the most vulnerable people. To conclude, Chairperson, our fiscal policy, premised as the ANC, is anchored on the people, placing the people at the center of our transformation and development agenda. The social wage is an investment in the people of South Africa. It is an investment in the future of our nation. Higher education and basic education achievements invest in our children's future. Throughout its history, the ANC was never naive. The transformation of South African and unequal economic relation will be smooth and straightforward. Allow me to remind those who trivialize and vulgarize the story of Tinswalo that their nuances cannot change the trust of the vast majority of the leadership of the African National Congress, nor will it distract us from our central task of leading socio-economic transformation for the benefit of the poor, weak, marginalized, and the working class.
Please conclude.
For us in the ANC, this represents the renewal of a democratic mandate to continue with a better life for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. To be followed by the DA Chief Whip of the Opposition.
Speaker, the President's attempt to sanitize the lived reality of South Africans fell flat on Thursday night. His revisionist and dishonest fairy tale is an insult to those who know the truth. They know the truth because they live it. They know what was told to them was a lie concocted by a bunch of speechwriters and not the daily nightmare that was once touted as the new dawn. I would like to perhaps assist the President to understand how the other side lives. I would like to introduce him to real stories of real South Africans. His fictional character, Tinswalo, a child born without democracy, is an exception and not the rule. In this country, the reality of young people is too bleak for words. Let me introduce you to Tabang, Mr. President, a 29-year-old man born in 1995. His family has lived in Alexandra all his life, and his entire worldview is characterized by lack, by poor service delivery, joblessness, and hopelessness. None of his family members have made it out or escaped the clutches of poverty. And under the Ramaphosa presidency, there's no hope that he ever will. Despite his matric qualification, he's unlikely to ever get an opportunity to study further or get a job that will give him a life of the dignity that he deserves. In fact, he was there, Mr. President. He was there when, in the heat of an election campaign, you, Mr. President, promised the people of Alex 1 million new homes. He watches with dismay when you speak tough on corruption, yet your very own Deputy President, Paul Mashatile, has been embroiled in the looting of money meant for the Alex Renewal Project. Your hypocrisy, sir, is not lost on him.
Just a minute, a second. Honorable Khat, point the horizon.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. The member has just cast aspersions on the character of the Deputy President. She knows very well, as a Chief Whip, that she must bring a substantive motion by what she said about the Deputy President. Thank you, Chair.
Honorable members, if I may just remind all of us, if we don't do things properly, and conduct ourselves in a manner that is in keeping with the rules, situation tends to degenerate. For to have a decorum of the House being maintained, all of us have to conduct ourselves in a particular way. This has been explained and explained over time. So, honorable member, if you wish to raise allegations against any member of the House, we all know that we need a substantive motion and therefore an opportunity to do things in a way that assists take us forward. So I'll allow you to speak, but please bear what I've just said in mind.
Chair,
Thank you.
Tabang watches.
Please proceed.
Chair, Tabang watches with dismay when you, Mr. President, speaks tough on corruption, when allegations of corruption and looting have been leveled against the Deputy President of the South African Republic, and he sits right next to you. How do you expect young people to take you seriously when in your very own cabinet you sit there and you entertain people who have allegations leveled against him? Your hypocrisy is not lost on him. He does not need to be sold a lie, Mr. President. He wakes up to a nightmare of broken promises every day. And he's unlikely and he's very likely to be persuaded to a life of crime. Because quite frankly, the life that young people in South Africa are living is hell in South Africa. Allow me, Mr. President, to also introduce you to Langalam Viki from Ekomani, a 3-year-old child who died inside a pit toilet because your government failed to uphold basic human rights of learners in schools. Yours, Mr. President, is a government that has trapped an entire generation of poor black children to a life of poverty. Xa izikolo ingezizwe indawo zabantwana bayofundela zingamangcwaba kukhona okonakeleyo. I would like to remind you, Mr. President, of Bongeka Buso and her children, Anati, Arabile, and Uratile. Bongeka was a mother of 3 children, Mr. President, from Ekdua, who decided to end her life and her children's due to the poverty crisis that has been engulfing millions of South Africans across the country. Bongeka, Mr. President, made a choice that no mother in this country should ever have to make. She decided to end her life so that she can stop looking at her children's expectant faces every day with no hope in sight. South Africa is not a poor country. It is unfair and unconstitutional that anybody should go to bed hungry every night. South Africa is simply a country that is poorly led by an uncaring government. It is a crime, Mr. President, that severe malnutrition for children under the age of 5 has risen by 26%. We know that 12,000 children have died in hospital since 2013. And most recently, the census has revealed that at least 2 million households in this country are experiencing hunger and forced to skip a meal a day. These are not just numbers. These are people who put their trust in you and you have let them down. Eyona nto ibuhlungu yeyokuba kudala abantu benemonde, kudala belinde lo rhulumente owayebathembise ubomi obuphucukileyo. Kudala abantu beginya noba kukraka benethemba kuba noko nizade nikhuzane, ningabayekeli betshatyalaliswa yindlala. Elo themba liphelile. Bayabona ubana lo urhulumente uphethwe ngabantu abazimisele ukutya imali yoluntu bade bayihlohlele entloko. Sebeyiqonda ukuba lona umbutho we-ANC ayisenguwo loba bemazi. Sebayayazi into yobana lona umbutho ngumbutho okhohlakeleyo. Yintoni nibakhohlakalele kangaka abantu boMzantsi Afrika? Ngoba kaloku yinkohlakalo mongameli into yabantu abayi-30 million abangabi nakutya umhla nezolo. Yinkohlakalo mongameli into yobana abantu abatsha bangafumani imisebenzi begcakamela ilanga kumakhaya befumbathe izidanga ezazifunyanwe ebunzimeni. Yinkohlakalo mongameli into yabantwana abancinci abaswelekayo yindlala in 2024. And to add insult to injury, our people are gaslit by the ANC government when they hold you to account. Their loyalty is demanded and they are routinely reminded to be grateful to the ANC. What is clear from the president's reluctance to recount the key tangible deliverables of the past term is that these are few and far between. He decided to do some fancy footwork on Thursday by focusing on the past 30 years instead of focusing on his 5 years in government. You see, he too is ashamed of his record in government. He too knows that South Africans are worse off today than they were in 2019 when he took over that office. And he too knows that his government's time is up. The people have finally seen through your sloganeering, which does not translate to real change for the people who need it most. Your fudging of the numbers fools no one, because people should not have to be told about your record in government, they should experience it. And so, as we look towards a post-ANC South African democracy, it is clear that we need a serious alternative government, a government that will not demand another 30 years from office from the people that it serves, a government that is content with being on a 5-year contract to deliver against its promises. And looking at these benches, I can tell you, Mr. President, political party, you certainly cannot be trusted with mending the very thing that you once broke. And so I would like to turn my attention in particular to the people at home, to speak to you directly. I want to assure you that inhlungu yabantu benu bantu baseMzantsi Afrika does not fall on deaf ears. An alternative is within reach, a caring government that works for you. Urhulumente ozanikhupha ebugxwayibeni anikhuphe entluphekweni ukuze niphile ubomi onanibuthenjisiwe 30 years ago. Allowing people to languish in poverty has been one of the most spectacular failures of this government, but it doesn't have to be this way. A DA-led government, amongst other things, would prioritize creating jobs and lifting people out of poverty. The 7 out of 10 young people at home who do not have work, I want to assure you, you will be gainfully employed. I want to ensure you that we, unlike Honorable Sylvia Lucas, will not tell you that load shedding is not the end of the world. We will make sure that we solve the energy crisis so that you can find a job, so that you can live a life of dignity. To deal with the crippling poverty, we would increase the child support grant to the same level as the official poverty line. This child support grant would ensure that it covers pregnant mothers to support child nutrition. We would make sure that this SRD grant that is in place will make sure that it is essentially turned into a job seekers fund. As a caring government, we would ensure that a safety net for the most vulnerable in our society is there. These interventions are fully costed. They are sustainable. They are needed and they are urgent. They will save lives. This is the pledge I'm making to the people at home. I want to assure you, help is on the way. It's not coming from this side of the house, but it's coming from this side of the house.
Order, honorable members. Our next speaker is going to be Honorable Ibrahim Patel.
Mr. President, honorable members, fellow South Africans. 2 weeks ago, a freight ship left Durban port for Ghana, with another setting out for Kenya a few days later. They symbolize the start of trading under the African Continental Free Trade Area or the AFCFTA. The culmination of this administration's work to translate a dream of African anti-colonial leaders into a reality. Those ships carried grinding media balls made in Germiston, helping Ghana's industrialization. Chest freezers made in Ladysmith, cooling products in small Kenyan shops. Export ready-made products displayed on the quayside range from food, safety boots, skincare and cosmetics, to smart electricity meters, steel products, and minibus taxis. They were made in this 5 years by South African hands, by Kwaugelo Namane, a 28-year-old industrial mechanic from Germiston, a child of democracy, a tinswalo of the steel industry. They were made by Tabiso Kumalo and Ombulelo Ngwenya, production workers from Ezakeni, by Mercy Poza, a production manager from Midrand, by Carmel Singh, a supply manager from Tongat, by Colleen Miller, a shipping and logistics controller from Germiston. But there's history to this trade. In June 2019, in your inaugural SONA, Mr. President, you committed to the African Continental Free Trade Area, and you subsequently chaired an extraordinary summit of African leaders to fast-track its implementation. 2 weeks ago, Mr. President, you cut the ribbon, symbolically releasing the first cargo onto that ship, and you banged the Ingungu drum at the ceremony in Durban Port. It signaled the start of preferential trade, fulfilling a 2019 SONA commitment. It is important for centuries before colonialism, Africans developed trade routes and facilitated the flow of goods among themselves, gold and salt, beads and carvings, ivory and gum, metalworks and textiles. From ancient centers of learning like Alexandria and Timbuktu, to the northern civilizations of Egypt and Carthage, the western kingdoms of Ghana, Mali, and the Songhai, the trans-Saharan trade routes, the eastern trading centers of Zanzibar, Mombasa, and Mogadishu, to the ancient southern civilizations of Great Zimbabwe and Mapungubwe, Africans traded with neighbors and with the world. Colonialism broke those ties, undermining Africa's industry and trade. The harm to our society lasted for centuries, reducing Africans to exporters of raw materials and importers of consumer goods. This left us poor, left us vulnerable, and left us dependent. With the African Free Trade Area, we're pivoting away from that model to trade as neighbors with manufactured and digital products, with services and with food, to break the bonds of neocolonialism, to reconnect with our history. In the past 12 months, South Africa exported R500 billion worth of goods to other African countries, mainly manufactured goods made by South African hands. And while Honorable Steenhuisen and Honorable Kwaggabe stood here cynically rubbishing the very action by government, during this administration, we secured a free trade agreement with the UK following Brexit. We negotiated a massive tariff reduction for rooibos tea exported to China. We gained access for our red meat to Saudi Arabia in this administration. We sold more than 1 million locally made cars and bakkies to Europe in this administration. We hosted the AGOA Forum with the United States and 30 African countries, which recommended the extension of AGOA when it expires in 2030. We hosted the BRICS Summit, expanding the voice of the Global South. We protected our local producers with targeted tariffs on imported poultry, on steel, on wheelbarrows, on tires in this administration. Newsflash, Honorable Kwaggabe, in spite of considerable shocks and challenges to the economy, South Africa made progress in a number of areas. Much remains to be done. Many hills still to be climbed. Unemployment and poverty must be tackled with greater vigor. But while Honorable Kwaggabe spoke here, clearly taking a vacation from reality, as part of our investment drive, hundreds of companies pledged 1.5 trillion rand in investment at the conferences convened by the President over the past 5 years. The refrigerators we exported to Kenya, The electric boards we exported to Ghana were produced following implementation of investment pledges of 1.1 billion rand. Look around you, honorable members. You will find many other examples. The C-Class Mercedes, the Toyota Cross, the Ford Ranger buckies were made with investment commitments in this 5 years, creating jobs. The undersea cables to connect Google and hold Zoom meetings with West Africa, and the renewable energy plant built by Aqua in the Northern Cape came from investment pledges in this administration, creating new infrastructure. Many factories were opened or expanded in the 5 years. Food facilities in KZN, the new biscuit factory in the Western Cape, a brick-making factory in Gauteng, paper pulp plants, chicken production facilities, boosting industrialization. And more will be opened in the next few months. While the opposition wants to cling onto wealth gained during apartheid, we recognize the more fundamental change requires fundamental shifts, structural shifts in the economy. In this, the competition authorities have been central. They ended exclusive leases for grocery stores in shopping malls. They tackled insurance firms that excluded smaller or township panel beaters from the list of approved vendors. They prohibited practices that limited franchise fast food stores from using township delivery services. They challenged exclusive supplier arrangement that resulted in unaffordable school uniforms. After competition market probes, Vodacom, MTN and Telkom dropped their data bundle prices. Google agreed to fund black South African app developers. TB drug prices came down, and we're now challenging cancer drug prices. And market probes are underway or planned in food and in steel. Master plans were developed in clothing and textiles, in poultry and sugar, in furniture and steel, turning around sectors that were in decline. Master plans support growing sectors such as car manufacturing and call centers. We signed an agreement to bring production of South Africa in a new factory in the Eastern Cape. And a new steel factory is under construction in Gauteng. Localization, honorable members, promotes structural change. Consider just partnerships between government and 2 South African companies led to production of billions of rands of COVID vaccines and new local production of anesthetics used during medical operations. We secured the right to produce for the first time human insulin to treat diabetes, oral vaccines for cholera, and vaccines for pneumococcal meningitis. While the opposition gives speeches about climate for the while the DA equates black excellence with corruption, we promoted economic inclusion. The DTIC policy supported more than 1,000 black-owned firms during this administration, from small businesses to industrial champions. They now produce goods ranging from food and furniture and clothing and to the steel and the Mercedes-Benz body panels. They employ well over 100,000 workers, and their annual turnover is more than 100 billion rand. Entrepreneurial and industrial tin swallows. In the next 5 years, we're planning at least 80 billion rand in fresh investment in black-owned businesses to drive more growth and jobs. While the DA thinks BEE is for politically connected people, we changed the competition laws to support worker ownership in mergers and acquisitions, broadening the shareholding, combating high inequality. Through work done in this administration, almost 200,000 workers are owners of shares in companies like Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, Imperial, Shoprite Checkers, Consul Glass, and Burger King. You wanted facts? Here are the facts. The equity stake that workers hold are calculated to be worth at least 62 billion rand. 200,000 children and adults of democracy will benefit from the dividend flows. People like Sishle Sitole and Mologadi Kodibona, they are the swallows of the factory floor of the economy, generating wealth for the nation and for their families. I thank you.
Your time is up. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Honorable Reverend K.R.J. Mishwe.
Honorable President, Honorable Speaker, Honorable President, I want to comment on a few things the President referred to in his speech, particularly when he reminded this House that he was the chairperson of the Constitutional Assembly and that he worked with many great leaders of our country to craft the South African Constitution. He continued to say, and I quote, "As President, I see it as my primary duty to defend our Constitution and to work every day to realize its promise." Close quote. Further, he said, and I quote him again, "We have safeguarded and promoted the basic rights in our Constitution, such as freedom of speech, association, and belief. We have protected and advanced the rights of members of the LGBTQI community and continue to combat all forms of prejudice and intolerance." Close quote. Mr. President, may I say that while you are protecting and advancing the rights of members of the LGBTQI communities, please ensure that this does not inadvertently infringe on other people's constitutional right to hold a different view, a constitutional right that you also promise to uphold. Young leaders and students, for example, should not have to be indoctrinated about LGBTQI rights at schools and universities if their own conscience or religious beliefs differ. In his concluding remarks, the President said, and I want to quote him again, "Guided by the fundamental principle of human rights and freedom, we have taken up the Palestinian cause to prevent further deaths and destruction in Gaza." Close quote. Speaker, I now want to tell this House why I don't believe that this government's efforts will yield any lasting fruits or even stop the hostilities between Israel and Palestine, particularly in Gaza. But Speaker, before I tell this House what I believe can and will help end the war in Gaza, I want to firstly express the ACDP's sadness at the tremendous loss of innocent lives and destruction of property in Gaza. That is why I believe that this government and the international community can end the war in Gaza within 3 weeks to a month if they want to. They will have to do the following if they are serious about ending the war. Firstly, they should prevail on Hamas to release all remaining hostages hidden in their tunnels. Secondly, the ANC and international community should order Hamas to destroy all tunnels under Gaza, particularly those leading into Israel. Thirdly, Hamas and the international community must accept the right of Israel to exist within safe and secure borders. Without these fundamental agreements in place, that war will never end, and the dream of a two-state solution will never materialize. Speaker, if it is not possible to live in peace next to a neighbor who has vowed to remove you from the face of the earth, it is not possible for Israel to live in peace next to Hamas, who has vowed to repeat the despicable atrocities they carried out on the 7th of October last year, which reportedly included rape, murder, abductions, and beheadings. The ACDP longs to see peace between Israel and Palestine, but this won't be possible until the right of Israel to exist within safe and secure borders has been acknowledged and agreed to. Taking Israel to the International Court of Justice will not improve the situation there.
Honorable members, order, honorable members. Heckling and so on is not such a bad idea. But if you drown a speaker, you are really going beyond the bounds. Please proceed, Honorable Michel.
I want to remind the ANC today that Isaiah 54:17 says that no weapon that is formed against Israel shall prosper, and every tongue that rises against her in judgment, she will condemn. ANC
You have gone too far, and your judgment
As you
is
conclude,
imminent.
honorable member,
When the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob said he will bless those who bless Israel and curse those who curse her, he was not joking, but he meant every word he said. You have invited the curse on yourself, and you are going to get it. Responding to the president's
your
letter-
time is up. Thank you very much. We now proceed to Honorable Mtwaledi.
Honorable Chairperson of the NCOP, Excellencies, the President and Deputy President, honorable members and dear South Africans, one has noticed that in this debate and in others before, we are being ridiculed or even prevented from quoting our apartheid and colonial past. While other nations, perhaps those which are regarded as for education in Limpopo, in 1983, just a year before our democratic elections, the results in the former Leboa government was metric results in the former Leboa government was 27%. You will never know that because metric results were not announced during those eras. From 27% to what we are getting today, that's a Tintswalo moment. And we can't, if you don't believe it, go to the archives and check, because the information is there. Mr. President, we have just released on the 8th papers on citizenship, refugee